Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Hannaford, a weekly politics program of the Western Standard. It is October the 14th, 2024. Happy Thanksgiving. Underfunded, under-equipped, and in the last few years, undermined by ideologies hostile to military virtue, this country's armed forces have, for this Liberal government, been an eternal second thought, or third, or fourth. They have also been treated as a social engineering laboratory to the detriment of operational effectiveness. With me today is somebody who has been vocal about these issues and cancelled as a result. I'd like to welcome Lt.Gen Michel Maisonneuve. He joins me today with his wife, Barbara, also a retired Canadian Armed Forces officer. And we're going to talk about how deep is the rot and how the Canadian Armed Forces can be put back together. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
You're very welcome. Sir, madam, you've both had stellar careers. Let me just quote from what they say about you here. You served for 35 years in some of the top NATO appointments available to a Canadian. You're a soldier's soldier, and they used to love you for it. 2 years ago, they loved you so much that you received the Vimy Award, which is awarded to, and I'm quoting here, a Canadian who has made a significant and outstanding contribution to the defense and security of Canada and the preservation of its values. So, in Hollywood terms, a Lifetime Achievement Award. When you accepted it 2 years ago, you gave a speech, however, that told a few home truths about how government policy was hurting the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and you called out the Department of National Defense. So you got cancelled. They were quite cross. Now you've written a book about that, and we want to talk about that and what else is in the book, which I think is a reflection on the state of Canada. But first, you were there getting this award. What did you say that upset the establishment so much?
Well, thank you. I mean, the first thing I would say is I talked about the state of our nation, and I had been for many years unhappy with the way our nation was proceeding, and some of the things I said, I mean, they were my opinion as a Canadian, and the fact that I was canceled for it, I mean, obviously shows that that people disagreed with my views. However, I also think that many others agreed. And I talked about the complacency of Canadians, about the lack of leadership, the lack of courage in our leaders, in our current political leaders and other leaders. I talked about service and the honor of service and the need for leadership. And I went through a whole bunch of different issues. But as I say, I was speaking as a Canadian. I was given this platform by receiving this award, and I thought this is my chance to actually voice my opinion, and some people did not like it.
Well, now let's talk very specifically about the condition of the armed services. As a newspaper person, I read what everybody else reads, and I sometimes have access to a little more information, but it seems that we have an establishment of 70,000, but we probably don't have anything, even 50,000 men and women available to deploy. Meanwhile, a lot of equipment has been given away to Ukraine. New stuff hasn't been ordered. The airplanes are getting old. The warships are getting old. The tanks are in Ukraine. Can you just characterize for us the effectiveness of the armed forces as they are today compared with what you knew when you were serving?
Well, first of all, this is not a problem that just started today or since I left or whatever. The Canadian Armed Forces have always, in my view, been underfunded and under supported. And you described them like that at the beginning. The thing you didn't say was underappreciated, and I think that is one of the things that Canadians love their armed forces when they come out during a crisis, or when they're out there on the world stage doing something that Canadians appreciate. But otherwise, the government, and not only this current government, governments before have always had trouble giving them enough funding to be able to be operational. on top of what's going on now, and I've described it before as a perfect storm. So it's a perfect storm. Why? Because the world is much more dangerous today than it ever was. Not only the technology advances and AI and the quantum computing and all that stuff, but we've actually got state-on-state conflicts going on right now in parts of the world. And Canada, in my view, is undefended. So it's underfunded, underappreciated, and our country is undefended. It truly is. If there was any kind of attack on our country right now, we could not defend ourselves. And it's because of all the things that you talked about: personnel, equipment, training. And so that's kind of where we're at today. And you also talked about the let's say the social experiments that are being undertaken through the armed forces, and in my view, that has a huge impact as well
on recruiting
and operational capability.
Yes. Well, obviously you have married somebody who has also given their career to the service of their country through the armed forces. Many of the things that I think we're talking about are aimed at the advancement of women. So maybe, Barbara, may I ask you, how do you view some of the initiatives that are coming out of the Department of National Defense and also Department of Veteran Affairs when it comes to memory and honor that you have observed?
Well, I think that what the armed forces is doing now is they've lost their way. Their objectives in recruiting, this idea that there has to be a certain percentage, and I think it's 25 that they've been aiming for, to have 25% women in the military. We've never hit that target. I think when I joined in the early 80s, I think it was around 10 or 11, and we managed to get it up to 17. So this arbitrary percentage, what's its purpose? I think your idea of a social experiment is bang on. I mean, the military needs to have warriors. I mean, isn't that what a military is? And yet we seem to be hell-bent on destroying the warrior culture. If there's one organization you want to have warriors, would it not be your military? That would be number one. And number two, these arbitrary quotas that we set up, whether it's women or it's LGBTQ minorities or the special interest groups, what we do when we focus on them is we reduce the standard. And I know that that's not going to sit well with a lot of people, but we do. We did it even in my day when we started, and women are going to carry packs. Well, I think the pack was 60 pounds. Most women can't carry 60 pounds. So immediately they reduced it to 40. Okay, so we could carry 40, but then who carried the other 20 pounds? So this idea that men and women are interchangeable is stupid. The whole idea of the military in recruiting should be meritocracy. And if you reinforce meritocracy and get rid of these arbitrary quotas, then you're going to have a force. And you're also a fighting force, a capable force, and you're also going to appeal to the people who want to be in the military. Changing things so that a man or a woman can take a man's place, it's not helping us. And you can see the recruiting numbers since we started this experiment, I don't know, 2 years ago or 3 years ago when we had that culture, the chief command and culture, the recruiting numbers are abysmal. And so when are we going to say, okay, that's enough? This experiment didn't work. Let's go back to building a military that we can be proud of, and that the people who want to serve will be able to serve and not be put at the bottom of the list because they don't fit one of those little quotas that they've established.
That doesn't mean that you have to be, refuse to be inclusive. I mean, I think anyone who wants to serve can meet the standards, should be able to serve, and should be respected, and they should respect the others as well. However, I think what you could call it is inclusive meritocracy, where, okay, the best, you recruit the best, you recruit in those areas that you can get the people. You talked about the 70,000 people. Okay, so the armed forces completely with regular and reserve is 100,000, let's say. Right now, the word is that we're missing something like 16,500. I believe it's more than that. But in World War II, when a unit lost 15% of its personnel, it was declared non-effective. So you could actually say the armed forces are currently non-effective. And it's not just the people you're missing, it's the type of people you're missing. You're missing that middle strata there of warrant officers and sergeants, captains and majors, who've all left because they're pissed off, by the way. That's why they're gone, a lot of them. They find a lack of leadership, lack of courage. Changing the dress regulations and allowing man buns and fingernail polish and all that stuff, that has pissed off more people, I think, than it actually has attracted. So you're losing these middle managers, and you're recruiting at the bottom. You're recruiting young men and women who will take 10 years, 20 years to get to that middle management. So it's a real crisis. And right now, as I said, it's a perfect storm with all the dangers we have internationally, our inability to participate. That's the impact today.
Sir, I was fortunate in my journalistic career to visit Afghanistan twice and visit the Canadian Army there. To be perfectly honest, they seemed like a pretty tough lot. And now you're describing people who care about their fingernails and their man buns. Afghanistan wasn't that long ago, maybe 12 years. What happened?
Well, I think it's radical progressivism. It's the progressive agenda that's been passed into them in the military. And you know what? The military responds to civilian direction. The military is under civilian control in Canada. That's a democracy, and it's a great thing and everything. However, when the military is forced to have these quotas or to say, okay, we're going to do an experiment, try to get the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion program into the armed forces, and we're going to put aside meritocracy to get more of these people from special interest groups. That's what happens. And you know what? The Canadian Armed Forces, the personnel, those that are serving now and those that have retired, they're the best that Canada can offer. They're the best people ever. They just don't get the means. They don't get the equipment. They don't get the training. They don't get the leadership to make them the best. And I'm sure that those you saw there, they were pretty tough guys, and they went to war, and we lost young men and women. So our country, sent our brave men and women out there, and not only did we lose a bunch, a lot of them came back sick, injured both mentally and physically. And we need to look after them. And you wanted to talk about veterans. Well, let's get into it, because our veterans are being treated very poorly sometimes.
In your remarks at the Vimy Award, you spoke of the military contract. That is the understanding that should exist between those people who put on uniform and are prepared to serve to the utmost and the people who they serve and protect. Could you just elaborate what that contract looks like to you and how we are failing in that today?
I'm smiling because my wife sometimes tells me I'm pontificating, but really I describe the moral contract as the contract between Canadians and their military. Okay, so the Canadians are represented by their government. The military is the men and women who decide that they're going to serve. A contract implies an arrangement that one side agrees to do something while the other side agrees to do something. That's the contract. So the moral contract is that our military men and women, they accept to go off and do the things that ordinary Canadians are not doing. They accept to go and fight for our values, fight for our country, help our country, even in Canada and domestically and everywhere. They accept to do that at the price, if necessary, of their life. So that's called the unlimited liability contract. So they accept to do this on our behalf. Now we, on the other side, Canadians on the other side, their side of the contract should be, we're going to give them everything we can to make them as successful and as protected and as safe as possible. So what does that mean? That means we're going to give them the best leadership, going to give them the best training, the best equipment, the best education that we can. We're going to make them as successful as we can. So just look at how now that contract is broken. Our men and women still agree to go and do this, but they ain't got all the good stuff. They don't have the best training, the best equipment, the best leadership or education to be able to do those things. So I'm saying that moral contract is broken between Canadians and their armed forces.
Mr. Harper, the former Prime Minister, put it very well, as I recall, when he talked about giving the armed forces the equipment they need and the respect they deserve. That was his understanding of the contract. It seems to be yours.
Well, as well it is. And the issue becomes then, as a politician, are you willing, do you have the courage to actually tell Canadians, well, we are going to spend more on the armed forces. It's going to cost more money to make them as successful as possible. And unfortunately, when you compete against some other social programs, well, you can't really have social programs if you got somebody else's army in your backyard, right? I mean, let's face it. So the first thing should be to protect, to enable our armed forces to be able to defend us. And so you need to make choices, and you need to have the courage to do that. This current government does not have the courage. That's why I said our armed forces are underappreciated. And frankly, it's been that way for a long, long time.
Is it a lack of courage? And I'm going to direct this one to you, ma'am. Is this a lack of courage on the part of the government, or is it that they actually not only don't care about this contract, but they actually have a very different intention for the armed forces? That they want to, well, we were talking about the social engineering aspect of it. Is it that they lack courage or they don't want to?
I tend to think that they don't want to. I tend to think that it's not important to this particular government, that and they use the military not as a force that it's meant to be to look at. They foist on it their ideals, their radical progressive ideas, and I don't know whether they just assume that we have nothing to worry about. The Americans will look after us, which seems to be a big assumption that people have. But they have certainly stripped the military of all its pride and its dignity, and they almost seem hell-bent on destroying it in some ways. You asked me about the sexual harassment side of it, Mr. Hanford, and I didn't answer you, and I apologize. But this witch hunt that started, and I'm going to call it a witch hunt because that's what it appears to be. And I have spoken on this before, and I've been accused of victim shaming, and that certainly was not my intent. I don't deny there are victims. There are victims everywhere, and just as I don't deny that there are predators and bad guys in uniform, like there are in every other organization. And yes, these people, these predators, we should seek them out, and we should, draw and quarter them, as far as I'm concerned, and get them out of there. But this glee upon which they jump on these accusations, and if you were to had no idea of the military and you were just to watch the legacy media or mainstream media, the assumption would be that every Canadian, every male in Canada that wears a armed forces uniform is a predator, is a misogynist, is just like a horrible person. And in my experience, that is absolutely not the case. Like, the vast majority of men that I served with were good guys. They were decent. They believed in what they were doing. Their principle. And, people will say, well, didn't something awful happen to you? And there were comments that were made. And I will tell you honestly that, how did you react to that? And a lot of the time, before I even decided how I was going to react to that, my buddy, my comrade beside me, male comrade, would pipe up and say, yeah, hey, that's not cool. We don't do that. So this idea that if something bad happens to you in the military as a woman, there's nowhere to turn to, that every single man that you're working with is as bad as the predator, I'm not buying it. I'm sorry, but I'm not buying it. And then part two of that is that when an accusation is made, boy, we go after the person, and his life is over. And even when it turns out that he's found not guilty, or the charges are dropped, or there's not enough evidence to prosecute, it doesn't matter. He's done. And you can look in the news for the list of our senior leaders who are finished because an accusation was made and not proven. And so I have a hard time with that too. We need to look after, our Charter of Rights, you're supposed to look after the accused. You're innocent until proven guilty. And that just doesn't seem to be the case in the military. And that's very sad.
Well, I'm told, ma'am, that there was a very large increase in the number of complaints after a fund was established to pay out victims who proved their case. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I really don't think I can. That came afterward. All I can tell you is that in my time in the military, there weren't very many of us, and you would think I would have heard more or seen more, observed more. And I did not. Not on that scale that you see here. And if there was a problem, usually that problem was dealt with. We have, military police, and there's a multitude of avenues you can go to for help. So I did not see this large scale. And this was when I joined, it was like a long time ago. When I joined, it was still okay to have Miss September up in your calendar, up in your locker. So things have progressed now. When I look at how far the young men and women are today, I find it astonishing to believe that there are that many cases of that kind of harassment. I just do.
I think for the benefit of
My
viewers that we should point out that you were in the military police.
I was.
And you probably would have seen anything like this before anybody else saw it. Is that a fair comment?
Got a complaint? Yes, we dealt with the complaint. I would say that. But again, perhaps it's my memory now, but when I go back to early age, the complaints that we usually had were, I think, what most police forces have. They were domestic complaints. Like a couple and a domestic complaint there. If there was a predator case like that, it was dealt with, and I didn't come across the Russell Williams case, like something like that, a predator that was sought out, but it wasn't widespread. If that's what you're asking, that's my answer. It was not widespread then, and I can't comment more on it. There were less women there, so you would think that perhaps it would be easier for one of us to be targeted, but I did not see it, and I did not experience it.
And I mean, knowing Barbara, I mean, obviously we've been married for over 20 years, and I think she would have been the first person to, go after these guys. I mean, it would have been, and when she says, I just, didn't see it, and, and those instances where there was misbehavior, they were dealt with immediately, either by her buddies or by herself or by the women themselves, who also said, hey, and I think most of these predators are cowards as well. And if you kind of rebuff them quickly, most of them will back off. But I mean, it's horrible what's happened. And I think the whole question of reparations as well, in terms of, looking after those that are found not guilty, who, we need to do a better job, and the armed forces need to do a better job.
And women have to be strong too. Like, I mean, this, I don't know, it's a phenomenon of this day and age that it's almost like, you want to wear a victim's cloak, like you want to be a victim. And that bothers me to no end. I mean, women of my generation, we made our way and we did some fighting and we got to where we were. And now to be suddenly, I need trauma leave because someone said, well, you're looking hot today. Like, come on. Like, we need to, we're not doing the women today. I don't think we're doing us any favors by jumping on the victim's bandwagon and not fighting for yourself. I think that has to be that, and it's promoted, this to be a victim. It's almost like it's something that is coveted if you can prove you were a victim. And I don't just mean in the military, but it seems to be the way it is. And again, I blame the radical progressives for this, that they have, it's not a inner strength and be responsible, taking responsibility for yourself and your actions and pride and all of those things. I think we veered off that path and we need to get back on it.
And it's today's narrative right now. And you can't go against it. If you speak against it, you're going to be canceled. And that's just the way it is.
Well, in the time remaining to us, I would like to have you speak about two things. First off is what you say in the book that's just been published. Look, can you hold that up? Can you just see the book? This was only released on Wednesday. There we are, In Defense of Canada. And I think there's a subtitle.
Yes, Reflections of a Patriot.
Reflections of a Patriot. In Defense of Canada. So you aren't just talking about the military in the book. So I'd like to know what other point you're making there. And then the second thing would be that we can sit here and damn the darkness, but in about a year's time, many people think, in fact, I would say many people fervently and desperately hope that we will have a change of government, and then it will be their problem, but this stuff has already been embedded, and I'm going to ask you how you unembed that and restore some sense of military virtue and the military contract. But first, what's in the book?
Well, in the book, I talk about all those things that I talked in my Vimy speech. As a Canadian, I go out there and I talk about, the complacency of Canadians who kind of very merrily go along with anything that the government does, as opposed to having, some common sense, an opinion on things, and even voting. I mean, our voting percentages are ridiculous. And so I think people need to get out of this complacency. Canadians need to have an opinion. I talk about our past, how our past is a glorious past that we should be celebrating and not canceling, toppling statues, etc. I'm talking about Canada's position on the world stage, and that I use it throughout the book, kind of personal experiences to illustrate what I'm trying to say. And Canada had a very strong voice on the international stage, which it doesn't have today, in my view. Then I talk about the radical agendas of the current government, but also current society generally, DEI, democracy, meritocracy. I wanted to talk about pardon. Yeah, I want immigration. I talk about immigration. I talk also about the climate and what this whole obsession with climate is about, and the impact it's having on our resources. I talk about our economy. I mean, I am absolutely not an expert in any of these subjects, but I have an opinion and I'm giving it. That's essentially what the book is. And then finally, I talk about the military and our veterans. I mean, those are two areas where obviously I can speak on.
Well, let's go to the
final chapter.
military. How do we, the Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall. How do you put him back together?
Well, yeah. So then I have the final chapter is how do we fix this? Not only the military, but our country generally. And so, but specifically on the military, I'm going to say, first of all, a change of government, obviously, I think will help. There's no, it cannot hurt. Certainly what's happening right now. So a change of government will help. The issue
getting
is
rid of the DEI.
Getting rid of the DEI, but also sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that like many businesses, many companies right now have said, okay, we tried the DEI, it didn't work, or we're going to take what's good from it and get rid of it. The experiment's over, and now we need to. So I think the military, number one, they have to do that, and then recruit to our target market. Recruit to the warriors. Recruit to the 71% of our military are young white men with conservative values that understand hard work, and they believe in they're proud of their flag, they're proud of their country, they believe in all those sort of old world virtues, I guess you could call them.
Values.
Yeah. Values. Those are the people.
Everything that the Liberal government doesn't believe in.
Exactly. Yeah, they, post-national, like why would you go fight for a post-national state? It doesn't make sense. So we need to go back to what our strengths are and recruit to them. And I mean, companies have come out and said it doesn't work, it doesn't make sense. And so I think if we do that, then the recruiting then will definitely go up. And that's the first thing. We need to bring in people that believe in what the military stands for, that are proud of their country. And once we start doing that, I think everything will start to work itself out. That's my
that's certainly on the personnel side. The issue also is going to have to be this new government is going to have to talk about the honor of service. I mean, and I talk about leadership and service as the way to fix everything. And it's true, it is that. If you look at when the government announced its defense policy update, never once did the Prime Minister in his speech talk about the importance of serving your country, service to the country. I mean, it's it obviously shows that he doesn't really care about it. He doesn't really think it's important, but that's how it starts. And then you fix immigration, you fix recruiting, and you fix retention. But then you can also fix it through equipment. You bring better equipment in, the young men and women will join too. That's an exciting thing. You make sure that you can do the training and you have enough money to do the training. Then you take the budget and you make sure you make it non-discretionary, meaning that you can't raid the budget every year because you're trying to cut the deficit. So there's a lot of specific issues you can do to fix this. And my last point would be, Nigel, a government will have difficulty fixing everything in one mandate. So a new government, we're going to have to give them the time, the support necessary to fix this. And there's going to be a huge backlash by the others who are going to be left behind and are going to say, oh, look, we knew this, he wasn't going to be able to fix that. Well, we're going to need to support him. The new government will have to ensure that it does the right things, makes the courageous decisions. And when I talked about courage, there's some courage required here to say, here's what we're doing. It's good for our entire country, not just for you in your area or these kinds of voters or this special interest. This is good for the country. And so explain it to Canadians. It takes a lot of courage. And I think we need that. We need leadership. We need service.
I think that last point about there's far more work to do than can be accomplished in one term is very much one that Conservatives who have high expectations of a new government will have to keep in mind. But this is the first one that they should be, well, maybe the second after the carbon tax. Anyway, we're getting off topic. Look, on behalf of Western Standard viewers, Madam, Sir, I'd like to thank you for your service to our country. Wish you both a happy Thanksgiving, of course. And for the Western Standard, I'm Nigel Hannaford.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.